So if you see bruising all of a sudden appear on this side of the face, it's not because a door jumped out at me. Let's take a look at next week's games. So this first one's actually a little bit vague, but I've seen it pop up a couple times. And Radek here has a mixture of roll and write games that is going to be sort of a package of games that's going to be launching on Kickstarter on the 14th. And one of them is called Mixture, as you can see here. There's not really a whole lot of information. And so I'm going to highlight it here as something that you should watch because it looks like it's a little bit of a different take on the roll and writes, and it's a package deal. And so I'm not sure what the production value will be. I'm not sure what the price point will be. But I know roll and writes are really up people's alleys nowadays. And it's been the real hot trend over the last year or two. And, you know, I think it's worth mentioning. I think it's worth talking about. But there isn't really a whole lot of other entry that I've seen elsewhere. So I just wanted to highlight this and point this out sort of at the beginning so that it's at least on your radar. The next game that I'm going to be talking about is Prosperitea. Play on words there, obviously. A game of artisanal tea blending. And this is a card game set collection type situation where you're going to be sourcing as one phase of the game, resources and ingredients to make teas, followed by the fulfillment phase where you're going to be blending these teas and making these teas and selling these teas. During that sourcing phase, based on the amount of the budget that you are willing to pay that is predetermined prior to drawing cards, you are allowed to gather a set number of cards from one of the various decks, ranging from 0 to 3 to even the top 4 cards of a deck in order to use them for the fulfillment phase. And the fulfillment phase also has a little bit of a unique aspect because you can play by yourself, but you can also ask for others to be more of a cooperative, assist you in fulfilling an order or selling an order of tea, and thus giving them a favor token, and they have to discard the resource that you're using, but it gives them that said favor token that allows them to use that as any then resource that they want later in the game. When one of the resource piles runs out, the game ends and you tally up your points. Relatively short rulebook. It's about 4 pages on Board Game Geek, so you can check it out already. Next up on March 16 is a relaunch of a game called Aventuria Extraordinary Heroes, which is another expansion for Aventuria, which is a 2016-2017 game by Ulysses Spiel. And this is a relaunch, like I said, and it offers 2 additional expansions and several hero expansions, and it did not fund in the past, but now they're going to be trying to fund on Kickstarter. You can see here it's going to have fantasy-esque theme, each having their own hero decks, and you can sort of see that it takes more of your Pathfinder card game type approach instead of the exploration, more of the individual fights, as in sort of even one big fight. And this is a card-based deck system from 2016 and an expansion to the already system that's established out there. Each of these characters that you're seeing comes with a pre-constructed deck, so you're not having any other additional resources or anything else to use like mana. So you're having to use what you have, and you're having to choose how you want to use things in your deck, as you can use them in more than one way. It is your typical everybody gets a turn, then the bad guy gets the turn, but you're also using a d20, and contrary to the traditional sort of role-playing game feeling and rules, high is bad and actually low is good in this game. So 20, critical fail, 1, critical hit. It is sort of more of an RPG-esque card adventure game. And you can check it out. There's plenty of other information about the base game as well as other expansions since the 2016 original launch of the core game. That's on Board Game Geek as well. So if this interests you, you might want to take a look at it. I'm not sure, again, how different it is or what else to compare it to, but this is definitely a saturated market. So I hope it has something to stand out, considering it did not fund the last time it was going for funds. We'll see after it launches. Next up, launching on the 16th, is another relaunch. It just canceled, and this is Bamboo Bash. I'm going to mention it because it's launching, but this one has had some conversation around it as a reskin of a previous game that the rights were not owned for, so I can't go into much more of those details. I don't know, and I don't want to make any assumptions one way or the other, but it's a dexterity game where you're knocking off the sides of the bamboo in order to score points without knocking off the panda that's on the top or the center core of the bamboo in the first place. Check it out. There's conversation about it. You can check that out yourself. I'm not going to get into that, but it's launching on the 16th again. So what are you doing now? Of course, on the 16th, if you got your wits about you, you can also go hunting for Sasquatch. Somebody's put $1 million bounty on Sasquatch, and you are being hired to go after the elusive beast. But as you would know it, other mythical beasts are getting in your way of trying to capture Sasquatch. So you, as your group of bounty hunters, are going to have to make your way through them to him. Now, it almost looks like an Elder Sign-esque Sasquatch game, because they say you're going to be rolling dice to match, I'm assuming, what are these symbols over here on the right side of the cards, and then in order to capture that card or location in the first place. Actually, there's a surprising amount of information on Board Game Geek already. It looks like maybe it had gone up a couple years ago, and I'm not sure what happened there. But then also, there's a couple videos from much more recently within the last month or two. So you can see a little bit of the overview, a little bit of playthrough, and a little bit of preview humor-esque video. So if you're looking for something that's like Elder Sign with a Sasquatch theme, this is what that reminds me of. So we'll see what it looks like formally when it launches on the 16th. Next up is GRBLD. It basically is like a scrambling word type game that you're going to be trying to make words out of when you draft letters, particularly consonants, in order to make these words. You're going to be filling up these rows as you go across, trying to eventually create words to score points. There are going to be powers, there's going to be combos, there's going to be multipliers, there's wild cards here, so you can kind of see a little bit of what you're doing on the left side, on the bottom, over the rounds, as well as in the upper right-hand corner. So a lot of symbology that you're going to have to learn a little bit, but it's going to be a different take on the word scramble game. And so if you like that sort of thing, it's definitely not for me. I've had my share of not being good at several of those, so it's going to be not something I'm going to look forward to, but it looks to be sort of a little bit of your roll and write word scramble-esque game all in one. So if you are a crossword word search type of person and you like roll and writes, this might be something that you should really be looking at when it launches on the 16th. Next up is Ghostwriter, also launching on the 16th, a different take on the social deduction type code names, clue words games in that sense, because you're going to be playing with 4 to 8 people where you've got approximately 1 spirit on each team, as well as 3 mediums that are trying to decipher what the spirit is trying to tell them. The mediums are going to be passing questions to the spirit, who is then going to be trying to answer them in order to get their mediums to guess the secret object. Now, here's the trick with this. The other team knows the answer, but they don't know the question that was asked, so you're trying to piece together the puzzle without letting the other team know what's going on at the same time. So it's got a little bit of a different vibe from a purely codenames standpoint. But if that is something that interests you, this might be worth checking out in terms of how it actually plays with a little bit more detail and what the rounds actually look like, because I think, again, with a lot of these social deduction type games, it depends on your group. It also depends on what it actually looks like when people are playing it, rather than just the vague description of how it plays. I think a lot of the social deduction games need to have a little bit more of that, sometimes more so than the other games when it comes to rulebook versus gameplay video. There is one video on Board Game Geek right now that you can check as an overview. Otherwise, you're just going to have to check it out when it launches on, of course, the 16th, because that's a Tuesday. Next up is an expansion for tabletop MOBA-esque game, multiplayer online battler, of Battle for Biternia, a new expansion, the Hero Pack. Now, right off the bat, this is going to appeal to some people with this game from Stone Circle Games, because it uses the bit graphics, the sprite graphics, on the actual cards in the gameplay. And some people like that as sort of an old school, vibe reference, and some people don't like that at all. Sort of like your pixel tactics, if you will. Now, as you can see here on a picture of the back of the box, what you're going to be trying to do is make your way to the other team's elemental tower, and there are various lanes in order to do so, and you have to deal a certain number of damage in order to destroy it. And so you're going to be making your way to make a path by clearing out the enemy's heroes or anything else that's in your way to do so. This expansion, they say, is based off of more of your classic Ghosts and Goblins, Castlevania-esque theme with the Hero Pack, so it's going to be adding more from that side of things. The gameplay is relatively straightforward. There's a sort of programming action type phase where you are assigning cards to each of the heroes in order to do them, and then you are moving each one of the heroes or deciding to pass, and then you're revealing those action cards, and then you're cleaning up in terms of the battle or the leveling up if they've gotten enough experience, and then rinsing and repeating until, like I said, somebody wins the game. There's no deck shuffling to mimic the respawn if your heroes get knocked out. And, you know, from people that have played a lot of the MOBA games, there's a couple comments on Board Game Geek that say, hey, this is flying under the radar. So if you are a MOBA fan, if you want a quicker, easier to set up, lower overhead sort of experience, I think this one might be worth checking out. I'm going to be checking out, even though this, again, like I've said in the past, is more of the thing that I like the idea of rather than I like the practicality of when I actually try playing it because of my own personal taste. But I think it's flown under the radar since it was released in 2018. So hopefully it gets a little bit more attention. It's just going to depend on a lot of those other factors, you know, timing, price, bundling, all of that sort of stuff that really takes a larger toll on some of these smaller projects and can be really a make it or break it. So we'll see when it launches on the 16th, but I'm going to check it out. Maybe you should too. Have you ever wanted to date a monster? Well, Dungeon Date allows you to sort of encounter monsters, either romance them, entice them, or slay them, depending on how you choose to interact with them. And it sort of has this Adventure Time type vibe based on the artwork, as you can see here. And you're going to be trying to collect sets of these monsters that are going to have card values. And you can even play cooperatively or competitively, as in if you run into another player within the same dungeon, you're going to have to fight them based on the cards you've just recently acquired and the values of them. You also have the ability, I can't make this stuff up again, there's going to be a Stylomancer. It allows you to adjust your personal style and part of your set collection in order to maximize your gains. I just got to see what this is talking about because, one, I kind of like Adventure Time, but we'll see what this does and actually how it actually plays in the first place. There's not really any more information on Board Game Geek, so you're just going to have to check it out if it interests you at all on the 16th. So there you go. Next up is Nutty Squirrels, a press your luck sort of collecting resources type game that's also going to be launching on the 17th. It's got this selection of 6 different branches with leaves on them that you're going to be using to do one of 3 various actions on your turn. You're either going to be moving onto one of these leaves cards, flipping it, or buying acorns for the winter. Now, flipping it is going to get you acorns, it's going to get you abilities, it's going to get you power-ups that you can use in order to be more efficient and to better do your task, but you can only have 3 of them at a time. They also include ways to interfere with your opponents, like stealing their acorns, or sicking an owl on them, or just allowing you to carry more acorns in the first place, or if there's a gap in the tree, you can even jump over it if that happens. So it's going to be an interesting game. It looks like more of a kids type family game, but I'd be intrigued to see what the price point looks like because this is something I could definitely see myself playing with like my 5-year-old right now. If it's not too complicated, if there's not too much words on the cards because kids that can't read, I need that sort of bridge as well. I think the artwork is definitely intriguing. So I think it'll be kind of interesting to see what it actually does when it launches. And the end game is pretty simple. You get 20 acorns or you run out of cards to flip. So, and then the most wins. Relatively straightforward. I guess the only thing I'd be concerned about is some of my kids do not always tolerate competitive games as well. Sometimes cooperative is more their preferred style. So I got to take that into account. How take that is this? Well, we'll see. Next up on the 17th is Champions Rise. Cooperative card game with some deck building. Now, they talk about it, and the board game description on the Board Game Geek page is not terribly descriptive or enthralling, and it's just your basic, you have a champion, you're using it to defeat heroes on a specific battlefield. There is a video under the forum section that gives a 4-minute sort of overview on what the turn breakdown is going to be like, and that these battlefields are significantly going to affect how the outcome of the battle and what effects happen during the battle. But it's your basic, you know, bad guy, good guy, trying to defeat them overall. I'm not sure where this one is going to land in terms of depth, in terms of replayability, in terms of just anything, because there's just not a whole lot of information. Although this 4-minute video does give a relatively good synopsis. So if this is your vibe, if you like card battlers with a light deck building component, with a little bit of just fighting in that sense, you should check out the video because, like I said, it's 4 minutes and it's probably worth your time to know whether or not this is worth checking out when it launches on the 17th as sort of a preview. And then we have 1815 Scum of the Earth also launching on the 19th from Tristan Hall. Hall or Nothing Productions. You may know him from the Killforth series, if that name rings a bell. The other side of things, he does these historical 1 to 2 player asymmetric dueling strategy type card games. This one is the 3rd in the series, and in case you can't tell who that is on the cover, that's Napoleon, which means guess where this is located? This is Waterloo. Now, just like the previous 2 in this series, 1066, Tears to Many Mothers, and 1565, St. Elmo's Pay, it's compatible with those, and it's taking into account that you just want a game as an asymmetric card playing game that you can just pick up and play. You're not deck building, you're not deck constructing, you're choosing how you want to play based on how you're drawing, and that it's a tense fight that you can recreate even the fight that was there. But also, like I said, it sounds like they're mentioning that this is cross-compatible, so you could take one side from this game, one side from the previous ones, as I mentioned, because this is a trilogy, and you could even deal or duel that way. And you know from All or Nothing, based on their previous, the production value is really good. The artwork is tremendous. It's just always the question of the price point, because Killforth was definitely a little bit higher price for what it was. I don't say that as a bad thing, I just say that as a matter of fact. So if you're willing to pay a premium, you're going to get a premium product. And the first two have relatively good reviews and are well thought of within that niche genre of card style games. So if it has any interest to you, if this particular one has any interest to you more from a historical perspective, it's probably worth checking out. Last up here is Heroes of Valintia. And there's not a whole lot of information about this. It's a dungeon crawler, chibi style, kids, family-friendly, RPG intro-esque game coming from designers out of Spain. And so there's not even a whole lot of info on Board Game Geek. It's not even on there. And it's on Facebook. They have a board game channel that Crow's Master Team Spain covered a video and an interview of it last week. And so there's a little bit more information on there. And they have a pre-launch page here. You can see, puts it here. And you can kind of get a little bit of a glimpse of what it's going to be. But apart from that, there's not really a whole lot of information. And unfortunately, I don't speak Spanish or read Spanish well enough to give you much more information. But it's going to be launching on the 16th. Now, I guess I'd wonder whether or not these are actually going to be colored miniatures. That would be pretty cool if they were, because you don't see those nowadays. But then obviously the price point gets jacked up. But it's just going to be interesting to see how this compares to something like Cora Quest, which was just out there in terms of price point, in terms of availability, and in terms of actual playstyle. If you're marketing it as kid-friendly intro RPG dungeon crawl-esque type game. So ultimately we'll see, but without any more information, it's kind of hard to say whether or not this is going to be something or how appealing it will be in the end. So that's about it. Actually, this is a super light week. I was really surprised when I made this video, and looking at my list, you know, there's a lot of ambiguity between here and the end of March in terms of campaigns. So I haven't really seen a ton like the first 2 weeks in March, really ramping it up, and it's kind of ramping down considerably at the other end. So we'll see what else sort of pops up between now and then. I think Solani, the abstract game, part of a collection, is going to be coming up. I think that's something to watch. I think, obviously, you have the big giant at the end of the month with March 23 being Mythic Battles Ragnarok. Maybe people are staying away from it. I have no idea. I don't know that much. But anyway, maybe a little bit of lighter week. Maybe I'm just missing half the list. I don't know. But maybe it just will be one of those things. And maybe, you know, I'll have a bunch of other small indie games we can talk about next week that launched, and maybe they can get more of the focus on next week's video, next Friday. So, as always, if you liked it, thanks for watching. I hope you liked it. If you didn't like it and you got to this part, well, thanks anyway. As always, anything you can do to help out is much appreciated. Any engagement that you'd like, I appreciate it. So, have a good rest of your weekend. Stay classy out there. I'll see you around.